Hi, my name is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about how do you awaken your friends and family in the Great Awakening. Coming right up. I've been really praying about this one. I've been thinking about this a lot. Here's the scenario. I personally, as I've shared with you on other videos, I've been awake for a long time, okay? I really started to become awake maybe around in the early 90s, but frankly, I was slowly awakening over the years. And anyone who is a believer in Christ is actually believing in something that the world thinks is stupid anyway. So that's another area in and of itself, just because Jesus rising from the dead is the weirdest thing in the world. Now, if a person comes to this awakening, what they're basically saying is that I don't believe in the world system. I don't believe in the mainstream media. I don't believe in social media anymore because they're lying to me. I don't believe in Hollywood and I don't believe in the government. I'm not saying you can't believe some guy in the government, one dude, okay, that you know. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the system of the world. And many of you are finding out all of these screwy things that are duplicitous. They're flipping you on your edge. And here's what happens. You struggle with hearing this information, especially if you're learning about it in the middle of 2021, right where we are right now. And you're hearing about this stuff, and you say to me, and I can't tell you how many times I'm hearing this, I don't believe it because you need to give me evidence. Where is it on the government website that NESARA is happening? Where is it on this site that tells me every little piece of information? And you're talking about you want absolute physical proof that's happening, or you won't believe it. I'm like, dude, I can't lead you there because the world doesn't want you to know it. It's exactly the same thing. It's a faith point. It's the same thing that we would say if you are a hockey team and you believe that you can win the Stanley Cup. I'll give you an example. The LA Kings have done this twice over the last 5-7 years. The LA Kings barely made it into the playoffs. They are the 8th seed in the Western Conference and they walk all the way through the Stanley Cup and win it. Now, if you start before the season or you're in the middle of the season, you wouldn't have said the LA Kings were going to win the Stanley Cup. But their goalie got hot and they played really well defensively and on. You kind of get the point. And it comes based upon their faith and not other people's faith. Because no one believed them. There was no evidence, there's no circumstance, but they believed in themselves and made it happen. Now, here's the reality. You can believe in the lies of the world, but let me ask you something. So I want you to think about, I'm just going to talk to you, because forgive me for a second, I'm going to talk to you as if you're the person that we're trying to wake up. Okay, so this might be some of the things you say. First off, you got to do this in love, number one. But the reality is that person has believed in a system over your best friends, your wife, husband, mom and dad, kids, whatever that might be. These people are people that you would trust, and you distrusted them. You separated yourself from them. My parents have been that way. No, my parents love me and I love them. And yet they think that I'm nuts. I'm just telling you the truth. And you're going to go, that's me, right? And yet, when you come to this reality, you have to catch this point. You've been wrong. You've been lied to. And what happens is your faith is completely eroded. Now, there's a couple ways that happens. First off, When you've believed in all that stuff, you find it's fear and anger that have motivated them and put that upon you. So one thing you have to get away from is get away from all the influences that do that to you. If you turn on a TV program, if you watch a media show or whatever, and they're arguing back and forth, that probably is a spirit of anger that you're getting all mad as you watch this. Or they tell you the news, or they tell you a circumstance, you're like freaking out. I remember my grandmother, this is a long time ago, okay? She was the greatest generation kind of person, and she would watch, these episodes, and I'm talking about fictional episodes like Days of Our Lives or something like that. And she's screaming at the TV, "No, don't do it, no!" And she's freaking out. What is going on? I'm looking at her like, you've got to be kidding me. You know this is fake, fiction, right? But he's got to stop it. Do you see that's the problem that we're struggling with? I know that sounds crazy, but that's what we've been doing. You have been focusing on the people that have been lying to you, and then you're going to find out it's not true. Guess what the first thing that has to happen? You have to have a little butt whooping. Well, that's rude. When you're wrong, when you were growing up and you did something wrong, you got a spanking. When you thought you were doing the right thing, but your boss said, you might have had a little bit of butt whooping. A nice way, maybe. But you had to have some correction, some discipline. I can't tell you how many times God has said to me, "Scott, shut up." You're going to go, "It's not in the Bible." Be still and know that He is God. Oh, 100%. That's shut up. The reality is you've got to understand that what you believe was wrong. And you have to have a little bit of come to Jesus conversations, right? Maybe with yourself. Now, every person who's come awakened in this time frame has come to that same thing. Do you understand that? They didn't. Now, we can gently bring them through, and we want to love and hold them. Hey, man, we want to be nice to the people in the world, but you know what? Sometimes you have to have a little bit of a spanking. And if you believed in this lie point and you've disbelieved everyone around you that you know and you trust, I'm talking about bosses and employees and friends, family members, sisters, whatever that is. You've disbelieved everyone and you believed in someone you saw on a TV program. What's that about? You don't know the character of the person, but you disbelieved in the people that you had a character of the person. I mean, let's put it in a slightly different way. So you know this good character, and you said no to that person. But the person that seemed good, you trusted in that. And so the difference here is faith. And you put your faith on that side of the fence. Do you catch what I'm talking about? And you put your faith in this, and then when you find out that it is a lie, you say, what do I do? Well, guess what you have to do? You have to say, I am wrong. I'm going to tell you a story. Growing up, my younger sister never would say she was wrong. She just wouldn't do it. And remember, simple thing. And this is when we were younger too, so get this. But she struggled with this over the years, ever saying she's ever wrong. So I threw some ice, I had a lemonade or something stupid, and I threw the ice in the sink. She goes, that's not gonna melt. What do you mean it's not gonna melt? It's ice, it's gonna melt in the sink. It's not gonna melt in the sink. And you could see her believing this lie and knowing that she was wrong. I didn't understand it at the time. And And then she's walking upstairs, well, I'm right. And she basically would say that. I'm like, do you understand that you're completely wrong? And see, if you're going to wait until the very last moment when the world is going to finally reveal how wrong you are about it, you need to have a little bit of a butt whooping. I'm sorry. Because if you don't have that correction in your circumstance, you're going to find another person who's going to tell you a lie, and because it's comfortable. Here's the point too. It's comfort versus uncomfortable. So if you want to stay in the lie and it seems good and it feels good, you put your faith over in this side, and then you find out the whole kit and caboodle has been a lie. You need to have a come to Jesus conversation, because everything around you has told you, with good character people, you've said to them and they've told you uncomfortable truths. They have told you history that is wrong. I remember having this first conversation with a friend of mine who I'd started to study the JFK shootings, the assassination, and realized that the story was wrong that they were talking about. And I remember in the early 90s, I would go to the JFK Memorial, the book depository. And at first, they basically said, there's this many people that believed, in the grassy knoll and the whole other conspiracy theory. Do you know that if you go to it today, there's a whole section upon this area because they've lost the narrative. Over 70% of the people believe in a conspiracy of the JFK shooting. You're going, wait a second. It's because the narrative have pulled over here into the uncomfortable nature of that. And when we see this kind of thing, you have to say, I'm wrong. I need to have a little bit of a spanking. And you can do it yourself, or you can let the world do it. And I promise you, if you do it like that, that's like ripping off the Band-Aid and everything, and all of your stitches come out, okay? Surgery, when you have surgery, and I've had tons of surgery, nose, knees, a whole bunch of different things. And when you have surgeries, what happens is that you actually get worse before you get better. It is painful if you've never had surgery. And some people say, I've had knee surgery and they just had little minor cuts. I've had massive cuts on my knees, okay? And massive other kinds of things. But they're very painful, but they try to get you to a better place. Guess what? Same thing here, babe. This is a painful area, and you've got to come out of that and reverse your faith into people who've been telling you uncomfortable truths. And if you don't see that, there's no hope for you. And there are people that you have to, and I have to cordon myself away from this. Common conversations that I get all the time is I get people saying, well, you haven't given me evidence of this. You haven't shown me on this website that tells me every little bit of it. And even when I do share some pieces of information, well, I don't believe that. I need to have this. And they put definitions upon what they would do. And see, and that's a person that could never necessarily run a business. They're never going to write a book. They're never going to create anything because it hasn't been done before. Literally had a guy. He was wanting to rewrite the Constitution. Now, it was a gorgeous piece of writing. He was trying to update some of the Constitution. And I said, yeah, but do you understand that President Trump actually signed a new Declaration of Independence and Constitution in July 4th of 2020? He was like, really? I was like, what are you writing? Okay, I mean, hey man, if you want to write, I've got books. I'm seeing books right behind me on the shelves, and I have books over here, and I've written about 17 books. But I also research whether or not that's been talked about. Am I just going to say the same thing? Using a story, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2020 won the Super Bowl, if I just talked about how great the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were, well, that's fine. You can write about that. Everyone's probably written about that area. But are you going to come up with something new and something maybe uncomfortable in that way? And that might not be a perfect analogy to you. I'm trying to give you different ways that you need to come to this. So the first thing is, you got to know you are being lied to. And if you want to not repeat the errors of the past, because that's what you've done, you need to learn your history, what you did wrong, the butt whooping, okay, to not repeat this error. Because if you repeat, someone's going to come up with something that seems good and you're going to feel trustworthy of that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to do. You need to do your own research, and there are going to be uncomfortable truths that are out there. And that is the point. I'm going to end with this kind of story. In John 3, I talk about this quite a bit. Nicodemus is this Pharisee. Now, a Pharisee is someone who knew the religious law more than anyone else. You could think of him as the Billy Graham type, the Chuck Missler type. These are big, big people who knew their Bible, let's say, okay? Jesus comes to him as a relative unknown at this time. And yet, he's the Son of God. He's the one that writes the Bible. John 1 says that he is the Word. He is God with God the Father. He has truth in him and equates all these things together. It's a very cool calculation when you look at that little equation all the way through. And yet in John 3, he's barely starting his ministry. And Nicodemus comes to him in the dark of night and says, I don't get what you're talking about. And Jesus has a bit of a chiding to him. He goes, dude, you are the person that should know this better than anyone else. Not only have you memorized the scriptures, you are the person that's interpreting it. And I'm talked all about in the Old Testament. Isaiah 52, Isaiah 53, Isaiah 63. We could go on and on about the scriptures that are screaming all about Jesus and all about what he's done. And yet that's what he's saying to Nicodemus. And then he says to Nicodemus, he says, you need to be born again. And he says, what do you mean? What does that mean? Do I have to go back in my mother's womb? He's going, again, bud, you're not listening to me. It's more than just going back into a physical womb. You have to go into an uncomfortable nature. The salvation experience is uncomfortable because it's not what you remember. It's not what you know like this. It's what you haven't experienced in that way. And that's why the salvation experience is so powerful. In the Great Awakening, I can't explain it differently than that. I'm trying to, but do you catch where I'm going here? When you deal with people who are coming out of this, they've got to distrust what the people are saying because they haven't used their logic pattern. The soul encompasses your mind, your will, and your emotions. And you have bought all of that stuff in this lie point. And you have to have a statement of, that's wrong. You have to come in and say, I need to research it for myself to understand what it's about. And when you do that, you have to go back to the same people that you distrusted, the characters that were good characters. You go back to them and say, what didn't I understand about what you were trying to say? And you might have to have a little bit of butt whooping before you come here, because you don't go here, you're not going into the next phase of this. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I know I'm speaking to you with a little bit of annoyance maybe, but I am a teacher and I have a little bit of prophet in me. So that means I'm not always Mr. Lovey-dovey kind of personality, okay? There's a part of me that has charity in me, but But really, what this is really about is speaking from what the heart of God is. They're uncomfortable truths. And if you want to stay in your comfortable truths, well, you're going to get ripped out of your bed. Really, really scary. I remember to give you an example of being ripped out of your bed. When I was growing up, my dad would always go up in the mountains and we'd go hunting, and I hated it. But 4 a.m, when it's, -5 degrees and snow packed everywhere, wasn't a thrilling idea when I was 13. That's what it is. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't safe and easy where I could just stay in there and wake up at my own time. I had to wake up at the uncomfortable time frames. I had to wake up because I knew that he was right. If we're going to go hunting, that's what we were going to have to do. And that's the same thing that we're dealing with right here. So I hope this helps you. I'm sure you're going to be upset about some of this, as you look at this, but I want to give you a perspective about how you're going to talk to people and how maybe you need to come to this great awakening. So thanks so much. Subscribe and like this.